Now, I'd like to welcome to the show Gary Shapiro, CEO and Vice Chair of the Consumer Technology Association and the legendary impresario behind the biggest and coolest trade show in the history of the world, the Consumer Electronics Show, the 2025 edition of which was just held a few weeks ago in Las Vegas. He's also the author of a great new book, Pivot or Die: How Leaders Thrive When Everything Changes. Welcome to Free the Economy, Gary.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I really want to get into the book and the lessons you have learned and taught there. But of course, we have to talk about the most important, exciting news, which is CES 2025. Everyone looks forward to it every year. All the cool, amazing new technology that gets rolled out. What were the hottest new discoveries?
Well, CES was amazing. And when you say what were the latest and hottest discoveries, there was 4,400 different exhibitors, every one of whom thought they had the coolest product or service.
Right.
So it's difficult to get your mind around the size of it and the global nature of it. But certainly artificial intelligence was there in so many different ways throughout the event. Um, from a personal standpoint, it's basically customization, things you could do for an individual, but from a business standpoint, it's improving productivity, improving all sorts of business processes. Digital health, amazing, so strong. Obviously, COVID pushed us in a sense of thinking about technology differently. There's a global shortage of healthcare professionals at every level, and technology is filling the gap and making life better. It's saving lives, improving access, and of course, we expect great things as AI and then quantum power research and development and solve big problems. And then there was mobility, autonomous driving. Certainly that's on the upswing suddenly. We have a new Secretary of Transportation who's excited about it. We had 4 years of doing nothing because it was all about energy electric cars under President Biden. But the rest of the world went forward, and a lot of our car companies suffered that were in that area. But I think they'll be back because it's something which will make transportation safer. And frankly, it'll save medical bills, and it could be a great way of cutting Medicare and Medicaid costs as well. Basically over 1 million people are hospitalized each year because of vehicle accidents, and also empower the disabled and the elderly, and that's important. And certainly, industrial technology was a big deal. Manufacturing, the agricultural sector, we saw a lot there from the big agricultural companies, food production and preparation, local food, sustainable technology was big, not only with food and agriculture, but clean air, clean water. And we had a special focus, just looking at the numbers yesterday, looking at the energy transition. That was wow. Those workshops were packed. People really want to understand, especially as AI and self and electric cars, and certainly quantum use energy. And that's important because everyone's talking about it. We really didn't use focus on energy. We did a lot with energy efficiency, but in terms of focusing on where the energy is going to come from, everyone's talking about that. And the best thing about CES actually that I think would thrill your crowd is not only the innovation and the inspiration, but if you look at the tech there, a lot of it is deflationary. I mean, we're the only industry out there which actually lowers our prices and gets our
Mhm.
products better. If you think of what a great big TV set costs at any point in history, it's gotten like a zillion times better, and it's like as cheap as water almost. It's kind of it's not honestly great for manufacturers because it is pure competition. It's a
Mhm.
very competitive industry, especially in manufacturing. The chip prices are coming down. The sensing devices, thankfully the smartphone is produced so that there's billions of them, and there's sensors in there which are just pennies a piece, and smart people put them together in cool new ways, and they solve problems.
Yeah, the reality that a lot of consumer electronics gets both cheaper and better every year is sort of amazing when you consider the some of the big categories of the economy, like healthcare, higher education, things where costs are keep going up in real terms. It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where you go back in time and you see Professor Frink from the 1970s, the computer nerd character, where he says, "I predict that in the future, computers will be 10 times as large, 1,000 times as expensive, and only the three richest kings of Europe will own them." And of course, everyone laughs at that joke because we know consumer technology actually goes in the opposite direction in all those ways. Um, otherwise we would have big screen TVs that cost $1 million today and not $1,000. Uh,
Less, a lot less.
Yeah.
Go
And
into a Best Buy or a Costco and you'll just be shocked at what you can get for a few $100s, these huge flat screen TVs with amazing pictures. And then you could add a sound bar and you're immersed in your home theater environment. It's awesome.
and you can watch YouTube just like the video we're recording now
That,
on your TV.
that's true.
So, you talked about in the book about how one of the big pivots, you and CTA and CES faced was during COVID. The 2020, because CES at the very beginning of the year, the 2020 show was able to go off before COVID really hit, but then 2021 had to be all remote. And the question of how you take an event with thousands and thousands of participants, or hundreds of thousands of participants, thousands of exhibitors, this huge physical event, and make it all virtual on a relatively short timeline. How did that work?
Well, I'm not that smart. I've been extraordinarily lucky in my life in just about every regard. You know, you've read the book, you understand. I credit my wife here. She's a doctor. She figured it out like within 2 seconds of hearing the radio report from Wuhan. And she shared that with my leadership within days. And we've been, since early February of 2020, we were talking about what we had to do in March. Early March, we had an incredible meeting where we laid it out. This was before it even was really in the US. And we'd also gone and prepared our own organization with signs, and we had, laptops and work from home plans. We really planned it out because, viruses have no government boundaries they respect, and they go anywhere. And there's no way a vaccine could have been created. I mean, it's shocking that it was created as quickly as it was. But the bottom line of it is we did a lot of scenario planning. And we were lucky to find a partner in Microsoft that did a pure digital event. Also, we were lucky that our show's in January, and it really hit. The first time in the U.S. was really early February and March that it really started spreading. So the calendar worked for us, and I'm grateful for that. But we did plan. We did shock our colleagues in the world of events by announcing, essentially we made the decision in May or June. But by July, we announced that we are canceling an event 7 years out, the physical event. And there's some of them were just angry at us because they thought they could have their own events, a miracle would occur. And we also realized that we had some incredible moments where we realized, well, going digital has an advantage. We could change the dates of the event and it wouldn't matter.
Mm.
So we did that as well, but we gave us an extra week. But we had to create a lot of things. And we did as good as we could. We spent several $1 million to do it. We kind of broke even and just on a cash basis, but we certainly lost a ton of money for a lot of reasons. But it was okay. It wasn't satisfying. And although I'm the paid cheerleader for the technology industry, I realize that I love technology, it does great things, but it doesn't replace the live interaction act of people getting together, having a conversation, breaking bread. And it's more difficult to use serendipity and discovery to put relationships together. And I've been saying for a long time, every company is a tech company, but every company can't go it alone in technology. And that's true. So there's so much cross licensing of patents that go on. There's deals that are always being cut. There's brand names that think about the car today that you buy and how many brand names are in that car from all sorts of different things that you're buying into, as much as the car itself and the experience and whether it's the gas mileage you like or the electric or hybrid or whatever you want, 0 to 60. But it's also a lot of the technology that's in there. So it's all about partnerships and relationships, but it didn't really satisfy anyone. And that's still true today. And I notice that CEOs, especially, if you manage a lot of people, if you have very broad responsibility, they felt very challenged by it. They couldn't get to know even their own employees. They couldn't meet their customers. They couldn't come up with new customers. But we all adapted during pivot, and that's what the lesson was. I mean, if you want to talk about the one book that went with the word that went with pivot that's not in the title is COVID, because everyone had to pivot their lives in some different ways. And it made a difference for all of us, and it required some self-examination. Some of it was great, like look how telehealth advanced then, and a lot of unnecessary state regulations, and kind of went away. Well, hopefully it's permanent. We keep fighting to make that happen. But there's things we just learn, and companies also, instead of just copying each other and everyone jumping to the same market, a lot of them just went into different directions. I think there's been a lot more innovation since the beginning of COVID than there has in any other time in our history. And we're seeing that. And that's why CES is really so successful. I don't really create or invent anything. My job is to get the people together that do. in a very efficient way so they could see each other. And the average person there has well over 20 meetings, and it would take them several months to go around the world and have those meetings. So
Right.
it works from a corporate perspective. It's very energy efficient, and it's time efficient, and it creates new business. And it's also, we run the show so that anyone with an idea can expose it to literally the 140,000 people that attend, which include every size of retailer from the tiniest to the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world,
Mhm.
but also investors and big companies, which are the potential partners. And that's it's my passion is innovation, but my means that I think I make a difference with a passion is definitely through CES.
Right. And so, one of the things that I thought was most interesting about your description of how CES actually works for people who are the tech company participants, especially for the startup guys, is that one of the most valuable things is not just that Walmart will come up and order 100,000 units, but that all of the other participants will give you feedback on your idea so you can improve it and iterate on it. And that is one of the most valuable things there. So in and in the book, you have a bunch of famous examples of companies, now very famous big companies, that have had hard pivots in product development. They started out doing one thing. They started out making cardboard boxes, and now they're the number one AI company, or whatever it is, some big dramatic change, and a lot of failure and hard lessons learned, along the way before they became so successful. And I wonder, I think a lot of Americans, they know the names of the biggest, most successful companies, and they see the final product, but they don't necessarily know these kind of like business school case study backstories about all the pivots that had go along the way. And I wonder, what is that? Does it is that a problem where people sort of look at a big successful company and they just see, oh, they're just a big corporate behemoth. They've always been successful. They're rich and powerful, and they kind of don't know the hard work that went into it.
Absolutely. I think you stated that well. It's not only the companies. I think that when they look at our country, they think it's manifest destiny that we're just great and we'll always be great no matter what we do. We could do anything. We could do stupid things. And that's why, I'm not a big fan of big strategic planning, but I am a big fan of thinking towards the future and coming up with some big goals. And that's what some of the most successful people did. I mean, I wrote Pivot or Die for a number of reasons. One was just not for business, but it's for life. It's how you adjust to something that's new and different. I mean, uh, a lot of my colleagues in the business world are just going crazy right now with this new administration and a compliant Congress. And I think there's an opportunity. I mean, yes, there's moments of terror even for me, who's more free market oriented, but there's opportunity there with great change, and it's very Darwinian in the sense that it's not being strong, it's not being fast, it's actually adjusting to a new situation quickly that allows you to survive. And that's a lesson for life for all of us as things change in our lives, because they always change in our lives. And humans just think we could keep the status quo, but that's not the reality of human. And that goes to how I mentor younger people and what I talk about, even talking to kids considering where they go to college or their first job. Those aren't the biggest decisions in life, frankly. The biggest decisions in life are who you marry, whether you have kids, whether you commit a major crime, or whether you do something unsafe. Big decisions, but every small decision, like where you go to college and where you get your first job and what you do, that teaches you about yourself, and you can learn what gives you energy and what you're good at and what you enjoy. And those are the kind of things that I try to, share in Pivot or Die. But for businesses, there's so many of them, and there's so many, there must be 200 examples in the book of how a lot of companies we know now really started and they've all made mistakes along the way, just the way we've made mistakes in life. But the most important thing that maybe people could take away from the book is when you have something really bad happen in your life, like you made a bad decision or you get fired from a job or you screw up in a relationship, that is the most biggest learning experience you ever have. Because you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures. And that's what I love about our country is that we respect people who started a business and they failed, and because they've learned so much. And it's not true in other cultures. And we are successful as a nation for so many reasons. It's our constitution, it's our rule of laws, it's that we're an immigrant nation, it's that we're diverse, it's that people come here with great big ideas and they think they can get them done, and often they do. But it's also because we respect failure as an educational experience. And that's not true in almost any other country except perhaps Canada or Israel. But other countries want to emulate us, and look what's going on with China. Look what's happened with the AI experience that we're there. I mean, someone's always going to come along and eat your lunch. You can't get complacent. And that's the story of our countries. And we can't let complacency sit in. And although President Trump is certainly doing things phenomenally different that makes me very uncomfortable, I keep telling myself that, we need some shaking up now. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not going to agree with a lot of what's going on, especially when it comes to his approach to trade and, physical blockades of products and trying to force a full employment economy to be the world's manufacturer with, our highly educated population is not going to be doing the type of things that go on in a lot of factories around the world. If we have factories and to be highly automated and they'll be require a lot of training. Look,
Right,
I
right.
want to see our chip factories built, and then I'll believe that we could have all these factories here. We have and then send away all these fairly semi-skilled and unskilled people who are actually running a large part of the country right now. It's the math doesn't work on that one, and I'm uncomfortable
Right.
with that. But a lot of other things, I'm good with.
Right. So, your comment about always needing always needing to learn, always needing to move forward. It reminds me, back in 2022, I reviewed this book, Build for Tomorrow by Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, who I believe has been a CES presenter at some point. Uh, his book is also about, embracing change and pivoting, not just in business, in career, but sort of your personal life as well. A similar theme. And one thing that struck me about that book that I was reminded of reading Pivot or Die was that sometimes both in business and in your personal life, the choice is presented as either playing it safe or pivoting with change. And the suggestion is always, well, you should pivot with change because that's smarter than playing it safe. But one of the things he points out is that a lot of time the playing it safe option is an illusion. There is no playing it safe, right? Once you've been fired, your opportunity to play it safe is evaporated. And so people, not only is it better to sort of embrace the change, a lot of times people sort of lie to themselves and think, oh, I can just play it safe and I'll be fine, when that's not even really an option. Um, and so I wonder, how do you talk, and you talked about, mentoring people and working with a lot of talented young people, like how do we talk about that with people who are anxious about change without making them sort of even more fearful?
Well, I think you could talk to people about like everyone cares about their family, everyone cares about certain things. A lot of people love their pets, and you could talk about, people like sports. You find elements of commonality and you build a relationship. Then you can talk to them at least on a one-on-one basis, or there's some reason show that you care about them more than just the results you might get from them. I think the way you could present that is, first of all, there's never only two options. And that's important to remember. There's a range of options that you can come up with always. And that's I think a very helpful way of approaching things. And it's, you play it out for them. I mean, the challenge when you reach my age and experience is that I've dealt with so many CEOs and I've seen them, especially when the entrepreneurs build up a company and sell it, the fact is someone else is buying it because they think they can make more money than you did. And they're likely to move you on, and all your friends and family that work there. And so that's just reality. But I know that, and I've tried to tell people that, and it still happens to them, and they're shocked. You can only share so much experience, but people have to experience things for themselves, and failure is a vital learning experience, and you could take that away. And the other thing, you could try to show them, you give them books. I've never read the book you referred to, and I'm
Mhm.
actually surprised because it sounds very good. Sounds like what I wrote, with its advantage of not reading every book in a field and basing it on a lot on my personal experience and a lot on what's happened in our industry and others. But I mean, one of the things in the book that's really, I think, valuable is that the smaller company said, oh my gosh, how could I compete with a big company? Well, the truth is small companies, it's easy to compete with a big company. Big companies are usually very slow moving. They have lots of chains of approvals, and they can't respond to changing marketplace conditions. And if we're ever in a time for changing marketplace conditions, it's right now. And so that, that's called opportunity to me. And I think that what COVID did, that I referred to a little bit, but to go 1 second deeper, is that companies would look at the landscape and they paint a picture of the present and where they thought the future was. Their competitors are doing the same thing, so they're all doing the same thing, not from an antitrust point of view, but they were doing it because they were looking at it the same way at the same time, and not thinking that their competitors are doing the same thing. So all of a sudden, every new area, lots of competitors jump in. It gets overcrowded. It's classic economic theory, and gets your crowded prices go down. Then a few survive, and the best survive, and it could be a roll up. It could be a really better, whatever. But competition's a wonderful thing. And that's fine. The odds may not be the best for you to jump in with everyone else, though. The odds are better if you do something really different that serves a need and that's why you mentioned Eureka Park, where we have our startups. Um, they get feedback for 4 days from literally hundreds, if not over 1,000 potential customers. And they tell them, and then we say, don't go there with a finished product. Go there with an idea that you can know could be a finished product, and don't make it perfect and don't have a plan, but prepare to change. And our research shows that most of them change their whole plan by the time they leave. And a lot of them get customers, and a lot of them may, shut up, just totally pivot into what they're doing to do something else because it's not a sellable concept. We all surround ourselves with people who know us well. They're afraid to hurt our feelings or our relatives, or so you need people that don't really care that much about your feelings. You need people that will tell you the truth. And in the technology field, that's pretty easy to find because a lot of technology people don't have the same emotional intelligence as other people. And you want honesty, they'll give you honesty. Um,
Well, yeah, and so, in the tech sector, like we talked about, one of the sort of area, especially sort of consumer facing technology, that is known for constantly rolling out new features, constantly, cutting prices and, fine tuning and, the Pixel phone and the Android phone and the iPhone are all trying to get the best camera resolution, the fastest processors all the time, every single year, not just, every 5 years. Uh, it's so competitive, sort of proverbially competitive, when it comes to those things. Yet at the same time, when it comes to sort of politics and the sort of political PR world, big quote, big tech is always the whipping boy for antitrust advocates and people like whether it's, Lena Khan or a certain senator from the state of Massachusetts. But actually people both on the left and the right these days in politics are, they'll say the phrase big tech and then they'll pause to give people the opportunity to boo. Why is how did it happen that one of the most productive consumer responsive industries ends up becoming this sort of go-to whipping boy for people in politics like this?
That's a great question. And, well, one very logical answer is our wonderful First Amendment gives anyone the opportunity to challenge things that the government is doing. And a lot of these legacy industries, like the broadcasters and the motion picture industry and the music industry, and some of these people I've been fighting all my life, even frankly, newspapers and magazines, they're all business models have been tossed upside down by technology in the last few decades. Like if you're a dead tree printer and you're selling advertise as media, it's difficult because you are by definition reaching a fairly broad audience where you could use social media and get your targeted audience. So life has changed. It's gotten more efficient to reach the people you want. And the broadcasters especially they're on a rampage against technology. But I think it switched, honestly. I mean, it was, I had mixed feelings about Trump's inaugural, but seeing those five tech leaders standing behind him, that was a turning point to me. That was a lesson. With the Biden administration, not only were they against big tech and attacking them and telling they can't buy small companies, and small companies that weren't getting funded, startups weren't getting funded because there was no exit. I mean, that's the biggest exit. A big company buys you. Not that
Hmm.
many companies go public or even sell to private equity or just grow off their profits and can grow that way fast. You need exits with big companies, and big companies need small companies. Even at CES, they're looking to make an investment. They're looking to be the first customer. They want to learn what they're doing. They want to embrace them, and then often they want to buy part or all of them, which is all great. That's America. And all of a sudden, the Biden administration, with one person who never worked in a job in her life with a business, in her early 30s, with no management experience at all, took on this agency and became a little authoritarian figure, didn't listen to any of the other commissioners, and had all sorts of rules, barely ever came to the office herself. And it was just horrible, frankly. And thank God that period of hell is over. And we have a new FTC chairman who may not love some things about technology. The fact that, the First Amendment is pretty powerful, allows you to do all sorts of things. Section 230 is really an important element for the First Amendment in our view, because it protects not only the big technology platforms, it protects all these read review sites like Travelocity or your Nextdoor, where you learn about what's going on in your neighborhood. It's so popular. If they start being held liable, those sites just shut down. So
Hmm.
it's the point is that we are at a turning point, I feel. It's been a tough 4 years. It was an anti-business administration. And I mean, the worst thing was I still can't fathom they would actually, if the US laws weren't enough to stop a company, they'd go to Europe and tell them to sue American companies. I mean, we have reached the point of, jumping the shark and frankly, insanity. And it's not just one senator from Massachusetts, frankly, there's a couple that are not that friendly towards technology. And if they see it, they want to regulate it. But we don't want to be like Europe, where everything is about privacy. And we don't want to be like China, where there is no privacy at all. I think we have to be right in the middle and balance the privacy needs versus all these great things that will happen, especially in healthcare. I mean, I was at a dinner recently with literally mostly cancer doctors, and they were just so frustrated by the fact that they didn't have a good software system they could use, which is they couldn't have a cross-disciplinary, and HIPAA was the enemy because it doesn't allow you to figure out what worked and what didn't and share that information in a way that's broadly, even if you anonymize it, it's still the old way of, you do an experiment with an A/B test and you write it up after multi-year testing, which is very expensive and permissions and then you might get we've choked ourselves to death in healthcare, and that's something where we could lead the world in. Although China actually, with 1.4 or 5 billion people in one agency with everyone's healthcare records, they're going to rush to this. But they're homogeneous. We're heterogeneous, and I think that's a step up in a lot of ways. I mean, they'll learn a lot about Chinese people and how they're treated for different diseases. But the fact is, diseases often dependent upon gender, on age, on race, on what you eat, on your lifestyle, on your genetics and
Right.
your parents, and all sorts of things. So we have an opportunities there that are huge, but we got to get reasonable and smart about it. And look what Europe has done with AI. They've made it so only the big companies can play. We have all the big companies as members, but 80% of our members and 80% or so of our exhibitors at our CES, they're smaller companies, and it's a culture. We've never had a disagreement between the big and small companies, which is just shocking to me. I know a couple of small companies that didn't like a couple of big companies, they dropped out. But the FTC thing was an emotional issue. From our two last chairs, who were small company people. The woman who just chaired us until January 1, she has a three-person operation, and now we have Amazon chairing us. So we're a volunteer-driven organization, and it's like there is 100% agreement on our principles, being pro-free trade, we're not anti-regulation in a way. We want regulation so we don't have to ask the government for what's legal and what's not. We don't like these congressional compromises where we'll leave it to the executive branch and whoever's in
Mm.
charge will tell you what's legal. We need
Right.
to excel as a country, and that's what we can do. And that's why we have to, as administrations change, we want to have a national discussion about this rather than just big companies or bad companies. Big companies are better in so many different ways, but they are slower.
Mm.
And the startup ecosphere is so important to the future of our country. It's our seed corn for our children.
Well, yeah, your point about, we don't necessarily want to be just like Europe. We don't want to be like, communist China either. That, the United States is sort of a uniquely entrepreneurial country, and that is something that is of great value. But it reminds me of one of our, previous guests we've had on the show. I think that was back in episode 43, Jim Pethokoukis, who's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He wrote a book called The Conservative Futurist, and he writes a lot about uh, switching from a left wing versus right wing view of society. He's like, that's the old way, and his way is that we need an upwing versus downwing dichotomy. And so upwing for him is an old futurist phrase from the 1970s that he's repurposed, but to be upwing is to embrace the future and technology and change, and to be downwing is the opposite. And so he says we need more upwing culture, and we used to have more in sort of the 60s and 1950s, 60s, 70s in America. Um, and so, but he laments there isn't enough sort of kind of pop culture influences, this sort of like just sense of excitement about the future and willingness to sort of tolerate some change because we expect cool stuff to be on the other side of that change. And so he mentions a few movies. He mentions the movie The Martian, sort of examples of what he thinks are upwing thinking. And as I was reading Pivot or Die, I was thinking about Jim's work, and it struck me that CES has to be one of the most major upwing things in American society. It's this huge, giant event that gets massive media attention that thousands of companies and tens, hundreds of thousands of people experience. And there are rundowns and highlights on every news site, every tech site is the top 10 cool stuff that was at CES this year. And there's no sort of, bitter dark side to it. It's just this is fun, cool stuff. And that's, virtually all of the coverage is all about that. And so it seems like the, that this sort of energy behind CES. It's sort of a vibe, as the kids say these days, that is precisely the sort of upwing thinking that people like Jim are talking about. And so I wonder if you think, is it possible to create a more upwing culture by doing stuff like this?
I was not familiar with that. I love it. I wrote it down. I want to read it. Um, yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's a lot of research which shows that if you walk into any office environment and people are in the kitchen because they do gather there, and what are they talking about? If you measure the conversations, those that are about the good old days, we didn't do this. Those are companies that are going down, but if people are excited about the future. And then you're right. I love CES because it is optimistic. It is the future. Almost everyone. Those are the discussions that are occurring. It's like we could do this, we could solve this problem, we could do this. I mean, and it's just, and it's one big optimistic fest, if you will, and geeks who really can do it, and innovators and people who think outside the box. The Mark Cubans of the world who goes every year, the Shark Tanks who do their they do their competition there often to see who'll be on their show. And but the sort of like I've talked about this with the CEO of Walmart and others. I mean, they want to go there, they want to be there, they love walking around Eureka Park. They see the optimism. And you're absolutely right in so many different levels. And you're right about even the political parties in a way. I've never been comfortable with Republican or Democrat because it's just to me a random collection of philosophies which aren't consistent. And then I look at what Congress is doing and what they're focusing on. Are they focusing on a good view of the future, or are they just trying to, force the past down our throats? And I'm especially sensitive because right now, as we're speaking, Congress is seriously considering, with huge numbers of co-sponsors, a bill that mandates AM radio in every car. I mean, what could be more backwards than that? You're taking a medium that almost no one listens to, that has no real measurable emergency value or safety value, even though they say it does, because most of the stations are unmanned. And we found that about 1% at most of people will get an emergency signal from AM.
Mhm.
And then you're forcing it into cars that don't want people to buy it, that don't want it. And for especially electric cars, which sell you're just throwing billions of dollars at and subsidize, and you're going to burden them with this extra weight, this extra cost, and a very hostile electromagnetic, and use valuable spectrum as opposed to doing what other uh, countries have done, and say, let's take that spectrum, take it back, and use it for something valuable. And I'm in shock because this is the most, in a sense, it's the most reversal of American legal culture I've ever seen. It's like forcing the cabooses on the cars, only still forcing them on the cars. It's like you might as well put a horse in front of a car, as far as I'm concerned, and say we got to do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. But there's political constituencies there which are hugely important. I mean, our election laws allow broadcasters to basically, just give a lot of time to members of Congress, and there's an AM radio station in every congressional district.
So yeah, we don't need to force every office to have a fax machine, and so we probably
That's
don't need to
true.
have every brand new car to have AM radio installed. Um, so Gary, we could go all day. This is very exciting and fun. But I want to respect your schedule and wrap it up. But before we go, one of the things that I thought is probably most fun for a lot of readers who aren't necessarily deep into the tech businesses themselves is there's a lot of anecdotes about people you've met and had meetings with, and a lot of fun names are dropped. People you've worked with over the years. And certainly you've known all of some of these biggest tech CEOs, for decades. What have you learned from mixing and mingling with all those sort of masters of the universe people? I know from my experience, the humble experience I've had dealing with A-list people is that people are kind of sometimes intimidated by them, but usually they're the humblest, classiest people around, and it's the people who are sort of insecure and haven't quite made it that are the difficult people to deal with. But um, from going through, and knowing a couple generations now of some of these people now, these big wigs, what has that kind of taught you about the business world, American capitalism?
Well, they're different. I mean, yeah, it's a great question, and I'm struggling to say I could say that they're all the same. I mean, they're very focused. I mean, I think of Michael Dell and Brian Roberts, who like always respond to my emails, and it's usually to say no because they're so focused on the one thing they're focused on, they don't want to be distracted. They don't see that. I mean, I appreciate the fact that they say no to me, and then Mark Cuban's another. He wrote the preface to my first book 15 years ago. The and he's just a like the in a sense a guy's guy that he made his money off broadcast.com with sports. And he still will respond to any email anyone sends him, which is kind of amazing. But then I also think of, I see some of them at a tense moment that they're uncomfortable with, when they're about to go on stage before a very big audience and something that their company's invested in. But I also see the passion they have for what they're doing. And it's tough to fake passion as a business leader. And I think just a few weeks ago, when after the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, spent 90 minutes on stage literally by himself and did an amazing job before not only several thousand people live, but a couple million people by streaming live. Uh, he was backstage with me and our president, Kinsey Fabrizio, and we spoke for like 20 minutes. And he still was passionate about what he's talking about. He didn't, if I just gave a 90-minute speech before that, I'd be like, give me a glass of water and let me just go celebrate with my team. He just was passionate. Ed Bastian at Delta, I've gotten to know him. He wrote the introduction of this book. He's just a nice guy. Some of them are really just nice. I mean, he's a leader like John Chambers of Cisco, who inspired with the nicest. But then you look at, I would put Bill Gates a little separate, but he's not as emotionally connected as others like that. But I would take Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, who I've never met honestly, but just observed, and Donald Trump. But I put the three of those together, and I'd say they all share something in common: is that they have big ideas and they pursue them often successfully, but they also lack a certain thing that we all have, which is the ability to experience shame or embarrassment or to say things that just don't have to be said that would make, like even if you look at his inaugural speech of Trump, like, he could have been a little more gracious to the fact that the Democrats actually showed up at his inaugural. And he just doesn't seem to care. And I know, but I've heard and I know, and I've read the wonderful book by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He actually does care, and he does care about people on a one-on-one basis. But just some of the things he does, I don't know. My point is that sometimes greatness comes at the cost of other things, I guess, is the answer to the question. I don't want to make this a very long answer, but I do believe that the normal person who's watching or listening wants to take away. I think you have to have a goal. And one of Trump's lesser known books was something like the big hairy idea. And he swings for the fences every time with his ideas. And we're all struggling with this, how he's shaking up government. Is it good or is it bad? Well, he's swinging. You got to give him credit for that. He's swinging for the fences almost every day, it seems. So, we need change in this country. We need to do things differently. We can't be complacent. Our success is not manifest destiny. I don't believe that God said America is going to be the best country in the world. I think it was the hard work of our and the foresight of our forefathers in creating our Constitution, and the hard work of immigrants, and the belief that they want a better life for their kids. And that's what we have. We have to keep that culture ingrained in us to succeed in the future.
All right. That's an excellent closing thought. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for being with us. And to everyone listening or watching out there, make sure to go out and buy that copy, Pivot or Die: How Leaders Thrive When Everything Changes.
Or listen to the audio,
Yes.
I'm the one talking on that one. This is kind of cool. Thank you so much for having me.